There is a weight many men carry without even noticing. It is not the burden of today's responsibilities, but the shadow of yesterday's mistakes, regrets, and missed chances. A man wakes up and feels the echo of decisions he cannot undo, the sting of words he once spoke, the memories of moments where he could have chosen differently. The usual interpretation is that this weight is inevitable, that the past defines who you are, and so you must carry it like a scar carved into your identity. But what if this belief is the very chain that keeps you from living? What if the truth is that the past, no matter how heavy it feels, is already gone, and the only reason it still hurts is because you continue to invite it into the present? This is the deeper dilemma. Men confuse memory with reality. They believe their failures are still happening now, when in fact they exist only as echoes. And by living as if the past were still here, they rob themselves of the freedom that is available in this very moment. The hidden truth is that the past cannot hurt you unless you keep feeding it. Unless you continue to give it power it no longer has. To see this clearly is the beginning of release. The moment you stop carrying a corpse and start walking freely again. If you've ever felt trapped by your own history, if you've replayed the same regrets until they poison your peace, then stay with me. Together we'll uncover why letting go is not forgetting, but finally remembering who you really are without the weight of yesterday. And before we continue, I invite you to subscribe, share this message, and leave a comment below. By doing so, you help this reflection reach other men who are silently wrestling with ghosts of their past, men who may need to hear that their freedom does not lie behind them but here, in this moment. For most of his life, a man is taught to believe that his past defines him. He is told that mistakes stain his identity, that failures mark his worth, and that regrets are debts he must carry forever. And so, he walks through his days dragging behind him a heavy chain of memory. He replays conversations where he should have spoken differently, choices where he should have acted more wisely, and moments where he should have been braver. These echoes of should have and could have follow him everywhere, shaping not only how he sees himself, but how he imagines others see him too. The result is a man who lives less in the present and more in the theater of his own mind, trapped in endless reruns of what cannot be changed. But this belief is a lie, because the past exists only in memory. It is no longer real, no longer happening, no longer alive, except through the energy you continue to give it. To say the past defines you is like saying the ashes of a fire still burn. They do not, unless you keep blowing on them, unless you keep trying to bring them back to life. The truth is that your past is not a prison, but a ghost. And ghosts have no power unless you let them haunt you. When you finally stop feeding them, they vanish, leaving behind the space for something new to emerge. The contrast between living in the weight of the past and living in the clarity of the present is profound. Before, every step feels heavy, as though you must drag yesterday's failures into today's opportunities. After awakening, you realize you can walk without those chains because they were never truly attached. They were illusions tied to memory, not reality. And once you stop living as if the past were still here, you begin to notice something extraordinary. The present moment feels lighter, wider, and more alive. Suddenly, what once felt like limitation becomes possibility, because you are no longer trying to solve problems that exist only in yesterday's shadows. To others, this shift may look strange. They may see you letting go of old grudges or no longer clinging to old narratives, and they might accuse you of denial, as though you are ignoring reality. But the truth is the opposite. You are no longer confusing memory with reality. You are finally choosing to see things as they are now, not as they were then. And in that choice, you reclaim the only place where life can actually be lived. Not in the endless echo of the past, but here, in the present, where your next breath, your next word, and your next step still matter. The man who continues to live in the past often measures himself by old mistakes, comparing himself to a version of himself that no longer exists. He judges his worth through failures long gone, believing that redemption lies in correcting them or proving them wrong. Every decision is shadowed by what he once did, and every opportunity feels tainted by what he cannot undo. In public, he may appear confident, successful, or composed, but inside, there is a silent turmoil. He is haunted by a narrative he did not write for the present, yet one he stubbornly keeps alive, as if clinging to that story could somehow change what has already happened. When he awakens to the truth that the past is gone and cannot be carried forward, the transformation begins subtly but powerfully. He starts to act without the constant burden of yesterday's guilt or shame. Choices are made not from fear of repeating mistakes, but from clarity about what feels authentic in the moment. Actions are lighter because they are untethered from the chains of old narratives. And this change does not go unnoticed. People around him may initially feel discomfort, as though something in him has shifted out of their control or comprehension. He may seem distant, detached, or strangely at ease, because he is no longer bound by the expectations set by his former self. Yet what appears as aloofness is actually profound presence. A man finally living fully in the now, fully aware that the only moment that matters is this one. Reinterpretation is crucial here. What once looked like weakness, letting go of guilt, ceasing to obsess over errors, releasing the weight of regret, now reveals itself as strength. What seemed like loss, abandoning old dreams, detaching from what cannot be changed, becomes freedom. By no longer pretending to carry the past as if it were still a living thing, he discovers the paradox. The emptiness left behind is not void but possibility, and within that space, he can finally see himself clearly, without distortion, without judgment. Life becomes an unfolding game in which mistakes are lessons, not chains, and in which the only true responsibility is to engage with the present fully, honestly, and courageously. As this understanding deepens, the consequences ripple outward. Decisions are bolder because they are no longer hindered by fear of repeating history. Relationships are freer because attachments are no longer motivated by unresolved regrets, but by genuine connection. Even failure itself becomes a teacher rather than a tormentor, because failure now belongs to the past, and the present is untouched. Slowly, the man realizes that the liberation from his past is not an external event, but an internal revolution, one that changes the way he perceives himself, the world, and every encounter, transforming everyday life into a field of clarity, possibility, and effortless engagement. With the recognition that the past is gone, a man begins to notice how much of his life was spent performing for ghosts. Every apology he made, every justification he offered, every self-imposed penance was directed at memories, not reality. The world itself never demanded these things. It was his mind, replaying old scenes, holding him hostage with the illusion that he was still accountable to moments that no longer exist. The relief that comes when he stops is profound. The burden of proving himself is lifted, not because he has achieved perfection, but because he finally understands that perfection was never the point. Life is not a ledger of mistakes to be balanced, but a canvas that only exists in the present, where action and choice can finally breathe freely. Before, silence often felt suffocating. A quiet room or a moment alone became unbearable because his mind filled it with regrets and self-recrimination. After, silence transforms into a sanctuary. Alone, he is not lonely. He is liberated. He discovers that the judgments he imagined from others were themselves echoes of his own self-criticism, projections of a mind still bound to what has ended. In relinquishing the past, he begins to respond to life as it unfolds, not as a reenactment of history. His decisions are infused with clarity, guided by what is needed now rather than what was demanded yesterday. And in this presence, he finds a calm authority, a power that comes not from controlling outcomes, but from understanding the impermanence of all things, including himself. Externally, this man may appear strange, even aloof to those still ensnared by their histories. Friends, colleagues, and loved ones may question his seeming detachment, misinterpreting it as arrogance or indifference. Yet underneath the surface, he is more engaged than ever. He listens more deeply because he is not distracted by mental replay. He speaks more honestly because he no longer needs to justify who he was. The tension between appearance and essence becomes a kind of silent teaching. While the world clings to stories and illusions, he demonstrates that true presence, clarity, and power arise when one frees oneself from the chains of what no longer exists. In this liberation, the man begins to see that his past, far from being a cage, has been a teacher in disguise. Its lessons are valuable only when he allows them to inform, not define, the present. Every regret, every error, every failure transforms from a heavy anchor into a stepping stone, guiding him toward greater wisdom and authenticity. And with this understanding comes a quiet confidence. Life is not about erasing the past or compensating for it endlessly, but about embracing the ever-changing now. Each action, each choice, each interaction becomes a testament to the freedom won by recognizing that yesterday's chains hold no authority over today's possibilities. As he continues to live untethered from the past, the man begins to notice subtler shifts in the texture of his life. The anxieties that once gnawed at him, fear of failure, dread of judgment, the constant compulsion to prove he is enough, begin to dissolve like morning mist under the sun. He no longer measures success by external approval or by the remnants of old mistakes, but by the quality of his engagement with each moment. There is a new rhythm to his existence, a kind of dance between action and awareness, where effort is guided by clarity rather than compulsion, and choice is informed by presence rather than fear. Even moments of discomfort, once unbearable, are now recognized as teachers, as signals that he is awake, alive, and fully participating in the flux of life rather than clinging to shadows of what was. This transformation extends into relationships, which take on a depth and honesty previously impossible. Friends, family, and colleagues sense a change they cannot name. Some are unsettled by it, because the man no longer conforms to their expectations of repetition and predictability. He no longer apologizes for being himself or seeks validation through performance, yet he listens more attentively and engages more fully. Love, respect, and connection now arise not from what he has done or what he has been, but from the authenticity he embodies in the present. The paradox is clear. The less he tries to control others' perceptions, the more profoundly he is understood. What once seemed like withdrawal or indifference is, in truth, a profound presence that anchors those around him. Even his sense of time transforms. The man who once lived as if trapped in yesterday now experiences a kind of timelessness. He recognizes that clinging to the past is a form of illusion, a narrative the mind constructs to give continuity to a self that is already changing. Freed from this illusion, he perceives life as it is, a continuous unfolding where the next moment is not predetermined by what has already occurred. The weight of regret lifts, and with it comes a lightness that permeates even mundane activities. Work, conversation, solitude, even leisure, all acquire a clarity and intensity previously obscured by mental preoccupation. This clarity does not mean life becomes easy or without challenge, but that every challenge is now approached with calm, presence, and a sense of playful engagement, as if he is finally participating in a game whose rules are understood, yet never fixed. The man's inner freedom manifests outwardly in ways both subtle and striking. Others may still label him strange, detached, or unconventional, unable to reconcile the ease he radiates with their own self-imposed chains. Yet the essence of his transformation is not to provoke admiration or envy. It is simply to live fully in alignment with the truth he has discovered, that the past is a story already told, that it cannot dictate the present, and that liberation lies in embracing what is, moment by moment. This realization becomes his silent power, infusing his presence with a magnetic clarity, a grounded authority that does not demand recognition, but commands it nonetheless through the simple act of being awake, here and now. In this space of awareness, the man begins to understand the profound paradox at the heart of life. What once seemed like loss, regret, and failure is, in fact, a gateway to strength, clarity, and freedom. Each error no longer punishes him, each disappointment no longer haunts him. Each moment of loneliness no longer isolates him. He has discovered that life does not ask him to fix the past, only to engage fully with the present. And in this engagement, he realizes a quiet, unstoppable truth. To live without the burden of yesterday is not to escape life, but to enter it more deeply, with courage, wisdom, and the unshakable knowledge that he is, at last, fully alive. As this awakening settles deeper into his being, the man begins to notice the subtle currents of life that were always present, but had been drowned out by the noise of his own attachments. He sees how every encounter, every fleeting moment, carries a reflection of himself, and that the world responds not to the person he thought he was, but to the one who is fully awake in the present. The rigidity of old patterns, habitual thoughts, repetitive anxieties, compulsive comparisons, begins to dissolve. He no longer fears judgment because he sees that the judgment he once feared was never about him. It was a projection of others' insecurities, a mirror of illusions. And with this understanding comes an effortless liberation, a lightness that transforms even ordinary actions into expressions of his authentic self. The man who once clung to routines as armor now moves fluidly through life, guided by intuition, presence, and a playful curiosity that feels almost childlike, yet infinitely wise. With this shift, the tension between appearance and essence becomes clearer than ever. To outsiders, he may still seem distant, perhaps arrogant, or even detached, as if he has retreated from the world. Yet beneath this surface, there is an astonishing clarity and openness. He is no longer confined by the need to impress, to perform, or to be seen in a particular way. Where he once equated being loved with being validated, he now discovers that love flows naturally from authenticity, from the courage to inhabit the present fully without pretense or apology. He recognizes that the past, with all its shadows and missteps, cannot touch him unless he allows it, and that the real tragedy is not what has been lost, but the continued belief that the past still rules the present. Each day becomes a canvas for choice, for presence, for engagement, and he begins to notice how this freedom radiates outward, subtly transforming the energy of every space he inhabits. The reinterpretation of concepts once taken for granted becomes a central rhythm in his life. Loneliness, once perceived as a mark of failure, is now recognized as a teacher, a space where clarity and insight emerge. Silence, previously feared, now carries wisdom and a deepened sense of connection to the unfolding of life itself. Weakness, once dreaded, is revealed to be an entry point into strength, because it exposes the layers of pretense and compulsion that have defined him for so long. Even loss, which once felt like a void, is now understood as a liberation from illusions that once bound him, a doorway to a life less burdened by expectation and more attuned to the flow of reality. In each of these reinterpretations, the man discovers that life is not an adversary to conquer, but a game to be played with attention, presence, and delight, and that mastery lies not in control, but in participation. As the consequences of this awakening escalate, they infiltrate every layer of his life. He engages differently with work, with friends, with love, and even with solitude. Decisions are no longer fueled by fear, need, or the desire to fix what is already past. They are informed by insight, presence, and the deep recognition that he is part of a living, breathing process far larger than his personal story. The outside world may misinterpret his calm, his discernment, and his refusal to be entangled in outdated narratives. Some will label him strange, others distant. Still others may even envy the ease with which he navigates life. Yet all of this is inconsequential, because he has discovered that the truth of his existence cannot be measured by opinions or assumptions. It is measured only by the depth of his presence, the honesty of his engagement, and the freedom with which he moves through the world. In this final stage before conclusion, the man understands that the liberation he has gained is not a momentary escape, but a permanent transformation. The past no longer has dominion over him, and the future is not a source of anxiety, but a field of potential. Every moment, even those of challenge or discomfort, is infused with a clarity and power that come from living fully in the now. And in this living, he discovers a paradoxical truth that is the very essence of Alan Watts's teaching. What once appeared as isolation is clarity. What seemed like weakness is strength, and what felt like loss is freedom. He now moves through life with the quiet assurance of one who has come home to himself, aware that the journey is never-ending, yet profoundly alive in every step. In the end, the man sees the truth that eluded him for so long. What once felt like isolation is clarity. What seemed like weakness is strength, and what appeared as loss is freedom. By letting go of the past, he stops chasing approval and begins living fully in the present, discovering that life is not a burden to bear, but a game to be played with awareness and presence. To others, he may seem distant or changed, but inside he is grounded, free and whole, carrying a quiet confidence that needs no validation. His journey is an invitation to remember that the past no longer defines him, and that the simplest act, living fully now, is the greatest act of courage and love. Subscribe, share, and comment to bring this reflection to others who may need it. Because every connection, every word, helps awaken someone else to the freedom that comes from truly living in the present.